Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another Axel 72 video, and in today's video I'm going to be giving my prediction for the Eduardo Nunez versus Christopher Diaz fight. And so if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so, like the video if you do indeed like the video, and let's get straight into it. Oh, of course, before we get straight into it, quick little plug of the Patreon. Link will be in the description. You can request any kind of combat sporting related content. There has been plenty of videos that has come out from that. There is a video of the Troy Williamson versus Mark Dickinson fight, which is out on the channel as well from this week. So again, like I say, you can request any kind of content combat sporting related, and I will try my best to do it. Again, I appreciate all the members in which are already on the chat on the Patreon, and like I said, the link will be in the description. Thank you very much. And so yeah, to get into this one, it is a fight in which I don't feel like fans are really that excited for. When you have somebody like Eduardo Nunez, who is a very exciting fighter to watch because of the power in which he possesses. It's the same with, an Artur Beterbiev, or, a big puncher like that, or, even like a Moses Talma at the moment. When you have this kind of big puncher around, fans are going to want to tune in and are going to want to watch because, like I say, you don't really know what's going to happen in the fight. The fight could end in an instant, and, it obviously didn't happen in his world title, fight, but now he has an opportunity in his first defence to go out there and deliver a knockout against an opponent in Christopher Diaz, who, like I say, isn't really a big name and isn't really going to be entertaining, the fans on paper, but I think he's a very durable opponent, and I think definitely could still give challenges to Nunez and could cause him problems. Again, we will be definitely interesting to see what kind of version of Christopher Diaz we have. I mean, he's only 30 years of age. I'll go through, his career in a minute as to, what he's been and done in his career, but he's still only 30 years of age. So I still believe that there is still life left in him for this third opportunity at a world title. But of course, we will see. And I mean, for Matchroom, there is a feeling like there isn't really a tremendous amount of high level events in which they're putting on at the moment. I mean, they've got Paddy Donovan versus Lewis Crocker. It's a good fight and it's going to attract a good amount of fans in Ireland, but it is for a vacant title, and it doesn't get me hyped up tremendously as a world title fight, just in my opinion, because like I say, it's for the vacant title. They're not actually challenging Ennis for it. Obviously Ennis moved up, and it's clear and obvious that if they did challenge Ennis, that would have been a much tougher fight for both guys. But that's probably the best fight on their roster, unless I'm forgetting something from Matchroom at the moment. They've got two events on, on the night of this, Nunez fight. So they've got this Nunez one, and then they've got Pat McCormack as well in England. And again, that's a very small event. And then, other than that, they've got Ennis returning against Uiza Lima, but again, that's not really a fight that's really exciting fans either. So it does just seem like I've touched upon already in certain videos that they are kind of saving just their big fights for, His Excellency's, involvement in them big ring events, which is a bit of a shame, but it kind of is expected because, of course, that's where the money's at. That's where the big name fighters are going to want to get involved, and it does seem like that's the only real way to get the big fights to happen, which again, at least they're happening, but it is a bit of a shame for all these other, not, it is kind of filler events to an extent. I mean, like I said, I feel like they've put on two events in one night just to say that, they've got that there. I don't think either events are strong enough to just be events by themselves. I think Nunez is going to bring a good crowd in Mexico as a homecoming, but again, like I say, just for the DAZN kind of schedule, it's better to have two events rather than just one, of course. For Nunez, a lot of people have said that perhaps for this matchup he maybe has ducked a couple people before, to go for a matchup which is on paper, like I say, a bit easier. But I don't think he's ducked anyone. I mean, when you look at the super featherweight division at the highest of levels, I think this matchup was probably already set before the scheduled Cache Ford fight, or, you know, they were expecting that to happen, so they weren't really trying to pursue that. And it does, it wouldn't surprise me if they still go down the Kakache Ford route as a fight. They might not. They might give one of them Nunez if Nunez wins against Diaz. Perhaps we'll have to wait and see. And then if you look at the other champions, I mean, Fulton and Foster are now fighting each other on a great fight. On the undercard of Fundora versus Furman. And then Navarrete, it does seem like he's going to be forced to rematch Charlie Suarez due to the controversy that was surrounded with that fight the first time. And so, Eduardo Nunez, it seems like he's using this voluntary defense, because I do believe it is a voluntary defense, as an opportunity to, bring his belt back to his hometown of Los Minches. I probably butchered the pronunciation, but it's in Mexico, and I think it's the first time he's fought. He's fought in Mexico not too long ago, but fighting in his hometown, like I say, bringing the world title belt back, which is why I do believe it will probably be able to get, a good Mexican fan base there. But at the same time, maybe he's wanting to get another 12 rounder just under his belt, if he is going to go the full distance like he did against Rikishi. That was his first 12 round fight, and of course he went the full distance. He might want that opportunity to see if he has to do that again and see how he can handle it and everything like that. So I guess in that way there's no real harm in this fight. I think there is a tremendous amount of risk in Eduardo Nunez losing, and then losing everything in which he's worked very hard for. But even if he does lose, it wouldn't surprise me if an instant rematch is made nonetheless. For Diaz, like I say, this is his third attempt to get a world title. His previous attempts have been in, once in the super featherweight division against Masakiyuki Ito. And this was a good few years ago, and then he fought Emmanuel Navarrete in the super featherweight division. No, in the featherweight division, I think about 2021, and he got knocked out in the final few seconds. The doctor got involved and kind of waved it off because he was getting, beaten down in them final few seconds. But like I say, when I say final few seconds, I think there was about 15 seconds left on the clock when they called it. And, other than that, he's got some other big major losses on his resume as well. Shakur Stevenson, he lost convincingly to him. Isaac Dogbo, he lost to him as well when Dogbo was at a good point in his career. And then in his second to last fight, he fought Henry LeBron and fought a close fight. He really could have won that fight, I think, if he'd have turned on the gas a bit earlier on and, like I say, pushed LeBron a bit more. But, he didn't. He had a few early rounds which were a bit slower, and eventually, he did get going and was having success. But again, like I said, it just wasn't enough. Then he went away, had a journeyman victory, and now he's, like I say, managed to get himself a world title shot. From that resume, do you say like he kind of deserves a world title opportunity again? Probably not, but Matchroom do seem to like to, especially at the moment, give opportunities to fighters who are in tough fights and test unbeaten guys. They've just had Jake Wiley back from his close fights, well, not close fight, but durable fight with Cambosis Jr. So again, it seems like they're giving that same opportunity to Christopher Diaz here, even though, again, like I say, it's not quite the same thing because it's a world title fight, and I don't really know if he, like I say, tremendously deserves it. But nonetheless, to speak about both fighters a bit more individually, Nunez, of course, has that immense snapping power. There's been multiple times in which I've seen just over social media where they have just put a clip or a little short video of just Eduardo Nunez landing a brutal shot, and you can hear the power. And there's very few fighters that, have that one punch knockout ability, and that snapping one punch knockout ability at that as well. And it's like I say, something in which you can hear and you can just, it makes you feel it. And I feel like that's what Nunez has. He's got that come forward pressure that doesn't give you time to breathe, and he's very hard to get off you. Typically, Diaz is a come forward type of guy as well, who doesn't really want to go on the back foot and is able to keep coming forwards. And so, again, it's going to be a clash of styles in that way for this fight, which again might dwell in, or might, intertwine into a nice fight. He's got combinations which are pretty much always thrown with intent. He can catch his opponent off guard with, a good change in levels and a good change of speed as well. I think his speed is a bit underrated. Sometimes he can just be, going slowly to the body, ripping body shots, and then all of a sudden he can just switch it up and catch you with a shot to the head, and that's where he's been able to get some quite brutal knockouts. He's got, a good level of, shot variety. He's got, good angles in which he works, and he's able to dip into his shots very nicely. His hands are pretty tight, and to be fair to him, I think his head's not on the line a tremendous amount. He can get caught, with his head being on the line a bit. And, I wouldn't say his head movement is anything too crazy. But again, you can see him sometimes trying to find the openings and, moving side to side. Like I say, just them little movements are just better than having your head just continuously on the line. And, something in which I really enjoy to see from him. Of course, his general body work is excellent, in which, the shots in which he throws, but the kind of two-shot combination of the left to the body and then switching that up instantly with the right to the head is really nice. A lot of fighters at the moment, you can see them drilling the left to the body, then the left to the head as a combination, or, vice versa. But not many fighters are really able to generate a tremendous amount of power with the left to the body and then the right straight away over the top to the head. And again, it's a doubling up punch in which Nunez is really able to throw well. Negatives about him, I think, again, of course, coming with that power, it means he can rely on the power, he can load up, he can become predictable. He's flat-footed, and he's digging his feet into the canvas when he's throwing. But like I say, he can be flat-footed, and that can result in his balance being off at times. Fighting at a mid-range, I think, can be a bit of a problem, and I think he does have to try and get in. So it will be interesting to see if Diaz, somebody who I think fights best in close, but does sometimes early on want to fight at a mid-range, if he is gonna try and fight a mid-range, or if he's going to instantly try and fight in close against Nunez, because, Nunez has a bit of a, surprising reach. For a short guy, he's got quite a long reach, but again, like I say, he just doesn't seem to be able to use it that well. He doesn't seem to be able to deal too well with people who circle off. He can be made to chase, and again, in that last fight, he was a bit. He squares up a bit. He can be, he's there to miss wildly quite often, and he can be out of position when he finishes throwing, because he puts so much into his punches and he really steps into a lot of his punches. If you can, see it coming and, move out the way, like I say, circle off, then he can be tremendously out of position, and that's when you can land counters of your own. He's got a bit of a lack of a jab. He obviously doesn't really want to take a backward step and instead kind of leans back. He takes shots in close when he's leaning in as bit as well, like I say, just being in range too long, and like I say, his balance at times can be a problem. Diaz as a fighter, I mean, he's a come forwards fighter, like I've talked about. He carries a good level of power, enough power to be able to, suddenly cause a bit of damage as well. There was a couple of shots in which he landed on Henry LeBron, which was able to cause, a couple of problems, and he can suddenly change tempo as well, like I've talked about. He gets you on the ropes quite well, and again, it will be very fascinating to see if he's able to do that with Nunez, or if it is going to be just a toe-to-toe war, which I think inevitably it will be. But it will be interesting to see. Like I say, surely one person is going to have to go into the back foot at some point, and who will that be? Because he was able to push back Navarrete in their fight quite a lot. He's got quite a nice tight guard. He changes levels, pretty well. He's willing to go to war, and, that's not always a positive, but I think, it's still a good attribute to have, I suppose, to an extent. And he will throw with you. He has a tremendous amount of heart, and he's really going to have to show it, I believe, in this fight. His work rate is good because, again, he typically doesn't always start the quickest, or at least in, his more recent fights, he hasn't. I think his work rate is able to, like I say, develop and grow throughout the fight. He switches up the power very well, maybe a bit unlike Nunez. A lot more of his shots, can vary in power and speed. He gains confidence throughout, like I've talked about, and he can corner you late on as well. If you get tired, if you get vulnerable, he will be able to back you up and get you in a corner. Negatives about him, like I say, I think he can be a bit of a slow starter, and I think he's not, able to get past the jab early on. And again, like I say, fighting at a mid-range in general, I don't think is his best suit. But again, I don't think he's going to have to deal with much of a jab or much of, a mid-range threat from Nunez. He's been hurt and damaged. Like I say, he's been in quite a few, tough war type fights. So again, that might start to tally up a little bit. He doesn't utilize his jab. Like I say, I feel like his jab could be better than Nunez, but again, it just doesn't seem to work that well. He doesn't seem to be able to put it together and put his shots together that well off it. He can be outboxed, he can be outmaneuvered throughout a lot of the fights versus LeBron, especially like the early to mid rounds. He was getting outboxed and outmaneuvered. He often hits to then try and land his own shots. And again, I don't know if that's something you'd recommend against Nunez. His head movement, again, is limited. He can be made to miss in close. And, against LeBron, again, he was missing a lot in close. He was parrying a lot of shots, just hitting light shots onto the guard of, LeBron. And LeBron didn't seem to be doing a tremendous amount defensively, but just really, he wasn't landing a lot in close. Diaz, and he wasn't capitalizing on good positions, and he was just being generally too wasteful with his work. He can be predictable in combinations, and he can wait too long to get going, like I've talked about. Who do I think is going to win? I think that Eduardo Nunez is going to be able to win, but I think he's going to be able to win via TKO in round 11. I mean, either Eduardo Nunez starts really fast and gets him out there and blitzes him out there in the first 2 rounds, or, when Christopher Diaz gets going a bit and the war starts to go, then I think Eduardo Nunez is still going to be, of course, generating that more power. And, Nunez's chin hasn't really been tested a tremendous amount yet. Maybe Diaz might be able to a little bit, but I still, like I say, feel like Nunez's work rate is proven that he can, go the full round distance now. And I just think, like I say, Diaz has shown again like he can be hurt into the later rounds when he is trying to go toe to toe and go into a war. And again, like I say, I just feel like this will end and will return Nunez into the winning column via stoppages. And then we can go on to fight next, of course, the likes of Kakache, Ford, if they do fight, then perhaps the winner of Fulton or Foster. That would be a great fight, the winner of that. If His Excellency gets involved, that could happen. I'm sure His Excellency is wanting and willing to get involved with Eduardo Nunez because he can see the talent. If not, then a Cortez could happen, but he's got a fight arranged, I think, for next month. But yeah, like I said, other than that, there's not a tremendous amount of options, so I feel like it is going to have to be a big fight next for Eduardo Nunez. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you did, like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.